Today I'm going to be talking about my most anticipated book releases for the first 3 months of 2025. I have 25 books to tell you about today. Most of these are mystery, thriller, horror novels, but there are a couple romance in here and some sci-fi and maybe some literary fiction in there as well. But most of it is mystery, thriller, horror. The rest is in that other bucket. It pretty much mirrors the percentages that I read throughout the year in different genres. Most of these books I tell you about are books that I do definitely intend on reading, but there are going to be some in here as well where I'm like, I don't know, we'll see. It's on my radar, but I'm not totally sure. The first book I have on my list is in that bucket of like, I'm not picking it up for sure. I'm gonna see what ratings are because I have a mixed history with Grady Hendrix. I'm just not a huge Grady Hendrix fan. I don't know why, and maybe that'll change for me at some point. So if people love this book, maybe I'll pick it up. I haven't really picked up his last couple of releases. I also don't tend to love witch books. I don't really like books with witches for some reason, but this is coming out January 14th. It is long, almost 500 pages, and it follows a group of wayward girls who grow up too fast, who get sent to this home in St. Augustine, Florida, where unwed mothers are hidden by their families to have their babies in secret, give them up for adoption, and most important of all, to forget any of it ever happened. You're following a 15-year-old who arrives at the home in the summer of 1970. She's pregnant. She meets a lot of other girls there who are also pregnant. There's an eclectic bunch of other girls there. They're highly monitored in this situation. And then there's a librarian who gives Fern an occult book about witchcraft and power, but power can destroy as easily as it creates, and it's never given freely. There's always a price to be paid, and it's usually paid in blood. It just doesn't sound like something I would particularly enjoy, but I feel like people are going to want to know about this, so I did put it on my list. Okay, this is an interesting one. It's called Strange Pictures by Yuketsu, translated by Jim Rion. This is 240 pages. It was first published in 2022, but I guess the English translation is coming out around mid-January. This is said to be good for fans of Hidden Pictures and Junji Ito, which I thought seemed interesting. It's a story where there's a series of seemingly innocent pictures drawing you into a disturbing web of unsolved mysteries and shattered psyches. I'm pretty sure that I have an arc of this, so I'm going to try to get to it as soon as I can. It describes all these drawings and says, structured around these 9 childlike drawings, each holding a disturbing clue, Yuketsu invites readers to piece together the mystery behind each and the overarching backstory that connects them all. This is a debut from mystery horror YouTube sensation Yuketsu. I have no familiarity of this person. I just ended up coming across this on NetGalley and I thought it seemed cool, so I don't know, seems interesting. Next is Tell Me What You Did by Carter Wilson. This is a thriller coming out at the end of January, and I really enjoyed the one book I read from Carter Wilson before. I've never read from him again after that, and I thought this one sounded good. So even though it's long, 450 pages, I will be checking this one out. She gets people to confess their crimes for a living. He knows she's hiding a terrible secret. It's time for the truth to come out. Poe Webb, host of a popular true crime podcast, invites people to anonymously confess crimes they've committed to her audience. She can't guarantee the police won't come after her guests, but her show grants simultaneous anonymity and instant fame, a potent combination that's proven difficult to resist. After an episode recording, Poe usually erases both criminal and crime from her mind, but when a strange and oddly familiar man appears on her show, Poe is forced to take a second look, not only because he claims to be her mother's murderer from years ago, but because Poe knows something no one else does. Her mother's murderer is dead. Poe killed him. The New Neighbor is the book that I read from Carter Wilson, and I really liked it, and this sounds really intriguing to me, so looking forward to that one. Next is Cross My Heart by Megan Collins. I do have an arc of this one, so I'm going to try to get to it soon. It comes out January 14th. This is a thriller. She has his dead wife's heart. The one she wants is his. The author of The Family Plot brings her signature prose to a twisty novel about a heart transplant patient who becomes romantically obsessed with her donor's husband. I don't think I've ever read from this author. I don't believe that I read The Family Plot, but this sounds really interesting to me, and I'm really hoping for some better thrillers in 2025 because thrillers just were not doing it for me in 2024, and I've already got a couple on my radar for early in 2025 that I'm excited about, so I hope they don't disappoint. Speaking of thrillers, another one in January is The Last Room on the Left by Leah Conan. The caretaker at an isolated mountain hotel finds herself fighting for her life and sanity in this twisty, addictive thriller. Carrie's life is in shambles. Her husband husband has left her, her drinking habit has officially become a problem, and though the deadline for her big book deal, the one that was supposed to change everything, is looming, she can't write a word. When she sees an ad for a caretaker position at a revitalized roadside motel in the Catskills, she jumps at the chance. It's the perfect getaway to finish her book and start fresh. But as she hunkers down in a blizzard, she spots something through the window, a pale arm peeking out from a heap of snow. Trapped in the mountains and alone with a dead, frozen body, Carrie must keep her head and make it out before the killer comes for her too. But is the deadly game of cat and mouse all in her mind? The body count begs to differ. It sounds good, it sounds wintry, and it comes out in mid-January. Next is Death of the Author by Nnedi Okorafor. This is coming out mid-January and it's a sci-fi book. Life has thrown Zelu some curveballs over the years, but when she's suddenly dropped from her university job and her latest novel is rejected, all in the middle of her sister's wedding, her life is upended. Disabled, unemployed, and from a nosy, high-achieving, judgmental family, she's not sure what comes next. In her hotel room that night, she takes the risk that will define her life. She decides to write a book very unlike her others, a science fiction drama about androids and AI after the extinction of humanity, and everything changes. What follows is a tale of love and loss, fame and infamy, of extraordinary events in one world and another, and as Zelu's life revolves, the lines between fiction and reality begin to blur. Because sometimes a story really does have the power to reshape the world. This one seems a little bit obscure to me. I just don't really fully know what kind of story it will be, so I am going to look out for some reviews of this, but I do know it's highly anticipated, so I imagine it will get a lot of buzz, and then I'll probably end up picking it up. I think this is the only romance book on my radar from an author that I have not read from before for this grouping of anticipated books. I'm not really reaching for new authors in my romance right now because I'm just not reading a lot of romance, but this one I've heard really good things about so far and it sounds really good. It's called Not in My Book by Katie Holt. The Hating Game meets Beach Read in this sexy and hilarious contemporary romance from a debut Peruvian-Tennessean voice. Rosie, an idealistic and passionate Peruvian American who has grown up without strong ties to her culture, leaves her Tennessee hometown to pursue her dreams of making it in New York as a writer. But her plan is derailed when she ends up in class with her arch nemesis and ex-crush, Aiden Huntington, an obnoxious, surly, and gorgeous literary fiction writer who doesn't have much patience for the romance genre or for Rosie. Rosie and Aiden regularly go to verbal battle and workshop until their professor reaches her breaking point. She allows them to stay in her class on one condition: they must co-write a novel that blends their genres. The reluctant writing duo can't help but put pieces of themselves into their accidentally steamy novel, and as they slowly get to know each other, they try to put their differences aside. Meanwhile, their manuscript in progress provides an outlet for them to confess their feelings and explore their attraction toward one another. When Rosie and Aiden find themselves competing against each other for a potentially career-changing opportunity, the flames of old rivalry reignite, and their once-in-a-lifetime love story is once again at risk of being shelved, unless they can find a way to end the book on their own terms. I think that just sounds really cute. Little enemies to lovers. It does sound exactly like The Hating Game meets Beach Read. Those sound like the perfect comp titles for this kind of story, so I'm hoping it'll be good. Next is The Rainfall Market by Yu Young Kwang, which is translated by Slin Jung, and this is coming out January 21st. And I do have an arc of this one, so I'm going to try to get to it very soon. It is a cozy fantasy that looks really short and sounds really sweet. If you could swap your life for a better one, which would you choose? On the outskirts of Rainbow Town, there was an old abandoned house. They say that if you send a letter detailing your misfortunes there, you could receive a ticket. If you bring this ticket to the house on the first day of the rainy season, you'll be granted entrance into the mysterious Rainfall Market, where you can choose to completely change your life. No one is more surprised than Saren when she receives a ticket. Lonely and with no real prospects for a future, Saren ventures to the market, determined to create a better life for herself. There, she meets a magical cat companion named Isha, and they search through bookstores, perfumeries, and fantastical realms while Saren tries to determine what her perfect life will look like. The catch? Saren only has 1 week to find her happiness or be doomed to vanish into the market forever, and all the while, a shadow follows quietly behind them. Dun dun dun. I love these stories about just changing your life and what you would do if you had some magical power to do something different, and I also love that there's a little cat companion. It sounds really cute. Another book that I have an arc of is Here Beside the Rising Tide by Emily Jane. This is a sci-fi book that is coming out at the end of January. A romance author takes a trip to her childhood beach home, but her summer is upended by the startling return of a deceased childhood friend, newfound love, and sea monsters. As a lonely 10-year-old resident of Pearl Island, Jenny Farrow befriends Timmy Caruso, and together they enjoy a glorious summer of swimming, fireworks, and carnival rides, not to mention rescuing a strange sea creature from a tide pool. Then, one late summer day, Timmy disappears. 30 years later, Jenny, now Jen Lorano, best-selling author of the Philippa Bay action romance series, is desperate to escape the fatigue of her career and her soon-to-be ex-husband. With her Pokemon-obsessed children in tow, Jen rents a summer house on Pearl Island, but shortly after she she arrives, a boy emerges from the nighttime sea. His name, he says, is Timmy Caruso. He's 10 years old and he's on a mission to save the world. In the days that follow, Jen grapples with work deadlines, her own spirited children, the mysterious boy from the sea, and her burgeoning interest in a very sexy contractor. But when alarming events unfold along the coast, shark attacks, tidal waves, a proliferation of sugar-addicted sea creatures, and a terror out in the deeper water, she wonders if just maybe the young boy knows what he's doing after all. The cover of this one really caught my eye, and then the premise of it just sounds really kind of sweet and nostalgic, so I'm looking forward to that one. Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney, coming out mid-January. I do have this book already because it was a December book of the month pick, and I did get it through that. Have not read it yet. Do plan on reading this in January. I have a love-hate relationship with Alice Feeney's books. Sometimes I love them, sometimes I hate them, sometimes they're fine. So I don't know which way this is gonna go. We're gonna hope for the best. Author Grady Green is having the worst, best day of his life. Grady calls his wife to share some exciting news as she is driving home. He hears Abby slam on the brakes, get out of the car, and then nothing. When he eventually finds her car by the cliff edge, the headlights are on, the driver door is open, her phone is still there, but his wife has disappeared. A year later, Grady is still overcome with grief and desperate to know what happened to Abby. He can't sleep and he can't write, so he travels to a tiny Scottish island to try to get his life back on track. Then he sees the impossible, a woman who looks exactly like his missing wife. Wives think their husbands will change, but they don't. Husbands think their wives won't change, but they do. I don't know. I'm either gonna love it or I'm gonna hate it. We'll see. This one sounds really interesting. It's coming out January 28th. It's called Head Cases by John McMahon, and I believe it might be the start of a series. Maybe it's kind of connected to some other books. I'm not totally sure. But this is following an enigmatic group of FBI agents as they hunt down a murderer seeking his own justice. FBI agent Gardner Camden is an analytical genius with an affinity for puzzles. He also has a blind spot on the human side of investigations, a blindness that sometimes even includes people in his own life, like his own beloved 7-year-old daughter, Camilla. Gardner and his squad of brilliant yet quirky agents make up the Patterns and Recognitions Unit, the FBI's hidden edge, brought in for cases that no one else can solve. When DNA links a murder victim to a serial killer long presumed dead, the team springs into action. A second victim establishes a pattern, and the murderer begins leaving a trail of clues and riddles, especially for Gardner. And while the PAR team is usually relegated to working cold cases from behind a desk, the investigation puts them on the road and into the public eye, following in the footsteps of a killer. Along with Gardner, PAR consists of a mathematician, a weapons expert, a computer analyst, and their leader, a career agent. Each of them must use every skill they have to solve the riddle of the killer's identity, but with the perpetrator somehow learning more and more about the team at PAR, can they protect themselves and their families before it's too late? I really like mysteries that just have this really complex puzzle element to it. Serial killers leaving riddles and clues, that sounds like it's gonna be a fun time, and also the enigmatic group of FBI agents working together sounds like it'll be a fun group to follow, so we'll see. Hopefully it's a good time. Next is We Are Watching by Allison Galen, who I have not read from before, but this one sounded interesting to me. This is a tale of psychological suspense where a single mother is desperate to protect her family as they become targets of a group of violent conspiracy theorists. Meg Russo was behind the wheel when it happened. She and her husband Justin were driving their daughter Lily to Ithaca College, the family celebrating the 18-year-old music prodigy's future. Then a car settled up beside them, the young men inside it behaving erratically, the Russo's car went off the road, and Justin didn't survive the accident. 4 months later, Meg works to distract herself from her grief, reopening her small local bookstore. But soon after returning to work, bizarre messages and visitors begin to arrive, with strangers threatening Meg and vandalizing the store. They are obsessed with a young adult novel titled The Prophecy, which was published 20 years earlier. An online group of believers are convinced the book predicted a plague, and social media posts link it to Satanism. People are sure it heralds the apocalypse. These conspiracy theorists vow to seek revenge on its author. As the threats turn more violent, Meg begins to suspect that Justin's death may have not been an accident. To find answers and save herself and Lily, she must get to the root of the lies fueling these people to come after them and find a way to face them head on. Lastly, for January, there's a new Freida McFadden, and I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read this one. The last book I read from her was slightly more successful, so I don't know. This one sounds kind of interesting to me. The nightmare she's running from is nothing compared to where she's headed. Tegan is 8 months pregnant, alone, and desperately wants to put her crumbling life in the rearview mirror. So she hits the road, planning to stay with her brother until she can figure out her next move, but she doesn't realize she's heading straight into a blizzard. She never arrives at her destination. Stranded in rural Maine with a dead car and broken ankle, Tegan worries she's made a terrible mistake. Then a miracle, she is rescued by a couple who offers her a room in their warm cabin until the snow clears. But something isn't right. Tegan believed she was waiting out the storm, but as time ticks by, she comes to realize she's in grave danger. This safe haven isn't what she thought it was, and staying here may have been her most deadly mistake yet. And now she must do whatever it takes to save herself and her unborn child. I like wintry books, I like survival books, I like creepy cabins, strangers and snowstorms, so maybe it'll be a good time. Now into February, we have Scythe and Sparrow, which is the third book in the Ruinous Love trilogy, which is the series that started with Butcher and Blackbird. This story is going to follow Rose, who is a circus performer, and a doctor, Fionn. The series follows three brothers, so this will be Fionn's story. These are dark romances, and I really had a lot of fun with Butcher and Blackbird. I didn't like Leather and Lark quite as much, but this is going to be the last book in the series, so I'm going to read it just to finish it out. I've read a little bit from Lisa Unger. I don't always pick up her books, but this one sounded good to me. It's called Close Your Eyes and Count to 10, coming out February 18th. When the real game begins, who will make it to the count of 10? Charismatic daredevil and extreme adventurer Maverick Dillon invites you to the ultimate game of hide and seek. But as the players gather on Falco Island, the event quickly spirals into a chilling test of survival. A storm rages as a deadly threat stalks the contestants, turning the challenge into something far more sinister than the social media stunt it was intended to be. Enter Adele, a single mother with a fierce determination to protect her children at all costs. When she begins the game, she unwittingly enters a twisted web of deception and intrigue. Can she maneuver through the treacherous storm and the relentless competition and get home to her family? In a ruthless battle for survival where the stakes are higher than ever, the blurry line between the virtual and the real proves that the only person we can trust is ourselves. I love a survival thriller, and I really like that there is a game element to this with hide and seek. It sounds like something that might be a little over the top and ridiculous, which is my sweet spot in thrillers, so hopefully this will be a good one. Next is Deep End, originally titled Wet. This is the new Ali Hazelwood novel coming out February 4th. This does look pretty long, 464 pages, but seeing Ali Hazelwood talk about this book has intrigued me. I don't usually read sports romance, but I'm interested in this. A competitive diver and an ace swimmer jump into forbidden waters in this steamy college romance. Scarlett Vandermeer is swimming upstream. A junior at Stanford and a student athlete who specializes in platform diving, Scarlett prefers to keep her head down, concentrating on getting into med school and on recovering from the injury that almost ended her career. She has no time for relationships, at least that's what she tells herself. Swim captain, world champion, all-around aquatics golden boy, Luke Blomqvist thrives on discipline. It's how he wins gold medals and breaks records, complete focus with every stroke. On the surface, Lucas and Scarlett have nothing in common until a well-guarded secret slips out and everything changes. So they start an arrangement, and as the pressure leading to the Olympics heats up, so does their relationship. It was supposed to just be a temporary, mutually satisfying fling, but when staying away from Lucas becomes impossible, Scarlett realizes that her heart might be treading into dangerous water. Back to the thrillers, we've got You Are Fatally Invited by Ande Pliego coming out February 11th. This is a book set at an exclusive thriller writer's retreat hosted on a private island that turns lethal when one of the authors is found murdered in this twisty locked room mystery. That sentence is everything I love. A writer's retreat, a locked room, a private island. I'm in. Will anything ever top The Writer's Retreat by Julia Bartz when it comes to a thriller that is at a writer's retreat? I don't know, but hopefully this one can compete. Next is Listen to Your Sister by Nina Viel. This one is a horror novel that comes out February 4th, and it says it's for fans of Jordan Peele's films, Stranger Things, and The Other Black Girl. This is a laugh-out-loud, deeply terrifying, and big-hearted speculative horror novel. 25-year-old Calla Williams is struggling since becoming guardian to her brother, Jamie. Calla is overwhelmed and tired of being the one who makes sacrifices to keep the family together. Jamie, full of good-natured 16-year-old recklessness, is usually off fighting for what matters to him or getting into mischief, often at the same time. Dre, their brother, promised he would help raise Jamie, but now the ink is dry on the paperwork, and in classic middle child fashion, he's off doing his own thing. And through it all, the nightmare never stops haunting Calla, recurring images of her brother's dying that she is powerless to stop. When Jamie's actions at a protest spiral out of control, the siblings must go on the run. Taking refuge in a remote cabin that looks like it belongs on a slasher movie poster rather than an Airbnb, the siblings now face a new threat where their lives and reality hang in the balance. Their sister always warned them about her nightmares. They really should have listened. Next is Famous Last Words by Gillian McAllister or Gillian McAllister. I can never remember if it's Gillian or Gillian, but I have really loved 2 books from her, so really looking forward to checking out another one. It is June 21st, the longest day of the year, and the life of new mother Camilla is about to change forever. After months of maternity leave, she will drop off her infant daughter at daycare for the first time and return to her job as a literary agent. But when she wakes, her husband Luke isn't there, and in his place is a cryptic note. Then it starts. Breaking news. A hostage situation is developing in London. The police tell her Luke is involved, but he isn't a hostage. Her husband, doting father, eternal optimist, is the gunman. This sounds like that one TV show that was on Netflix that had like 8 episodes. I can't remember what it was called, but each episode followed a different person. And that show was so good. So I'm really looking forward to this book. Finally, we are into March, and this is one of my most anticipated novels of ever. This is Wild Dark Shore by Charlotte McConaghy. I absolutely adore Charlotte McConaghy's works. She writes literary fiction books that usually have a mystery element to them that are just so beautiful and so well constructed. I'm so excited for this. We're following a family on a remote island, a mysterious woman washed ashore, a rising storm on the horizon. Dominic Salt and his 3 children are caretakers of Shearwater, a tiny island not far from Antarctica. Home to the world's largest seed bank, Shearwater was once full of researchers, but with sea levels rising, the salts are now its final inhabitants, packing up the seeds before they are transported to safer ground. Despite the wild beauty of life there, isolation has taken its toll on the salts. Raph, 18 and suffering his first heartbreak, can only find relief at his punching bag. Fen, 17, has started spending her nights on the beach among the seals. 9-year-old Orly, obsessed with botany, fears the loss of his beloved natural world, and Dominic can't stop turning back toward the past and the loss that drove the family to Shearwater in the first place. Then, during the worst storm the island has ever seen, a woman washes up on shore. As the salts nurse the woman, Rowan, back to life, their suspicion gives way to affection, and they finally begin to feel like a family again. Rowan, long accustomed to protecting her heart, begins to fall for the salts too. But Rowan isn't telling the whole story about why she set out for Shearwater, and when she discovers the sabotaged radios in a freshly dug grave, she realizes Dominic is keeping his own dark secrets. As the storms on Shearwater gather force, the characters must decide if they can trust each other enough to protect the precious seeds in their care before it's too late, and if they can finally put the tragedies of the past behind them to create something new together. A book that I'm sure is on a lot of people's radar is a prequel novel to The Hunger Games called Sunrise on the Reaping. This is coming out March 18th, and I didn't read the last new Hunger Games book that came out, but I did see that movie, and the movie was really good. And then this is Haymitch's story, and I really like Haymitch as a character. I find him very interesting, so I think I'm going to check this one out and actually read it. I'm sure they'll also then probably make a movie about it, but The Hunger Games is just top tier. I don't think I'll ever read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes now that I've seen the movie, but I want to get ahead of this one and read the book. Next is The Third Rule of Time Travel by Philip Fracassi, who is an author that I have enjoyed before. This is a sci-fi horror book. You're following scientist Beth Darlow, who has discovered the unimaginable. She's built a machine that allows human consciousness to travel through time to any point in the traveler's lifetime and relive moments of their life. An impossible breakthrough, but it's not perfect. The traveler has no way to alter or control the outcome. They can only observe. After Beth's husband Coulson, the co-creator of the machine, dies in a tragic car accident, Beth is left to raise Isabella, their only daughter, and continue the work they started. Mired in grief and threatened by her unscrupulous funder, Beth pushes herself to the limit to prove the value of her technology. With each new observation she makes, her own timeline begins to warp. The changes are small at first, and then they become horrifying. With her reality constantly shifting, Beth is on the clock to reverse altered history, but once the dominoes have been tipped, can they ever be reset? This sounds so good to me. I love time travel books. I love this concept. I think this is going to be really good. Next is Witness 8 by Steve Kavanaugh. This is the same author of Kill for Me, Kill for You, which is one of the only thrillers I enjoyed last year. And this is the 8th book in a series, but I got a newsletter email sent from the publicist at this publication. I don't know. I got something and they were talking about this book and they said that you can definitely jump right in and read this book, that you don't have to read the 7 books before. This is a book where you can enter the series, so I'm gonna try to check it out. I also did end up getting an arc of it. Something is wrong with Ruby Johnson. A former resident of the ultra-elite Manhattan upper class, Ruby now works as a maid in the type of houses she used to live in. Unassuming, she sees everyone's dirty secrets from the inside of their beautiful renovated brownstones, but when Ruby witnesses a murder, she has wicked plans in mind that don't involve telling the authorities the truth. Eddie Flynn, streetwise ex-con artist turned defense attorney, is the only lawyer in New York willing to take on hopeless cases. And none is more hopeless than John Jackson's. The gun that killed his neighbor, found with Jackson's DNA in his own home. Flynn and his unconventional team will need to use every trick they know to keep an innocent man from being locked up. But to save his client's life, Eddie must first protect his own, as the scariest organized criminals in the city are out for his head. I don't know, we'll see. I'll read it and I'll let you know if you can actually jump into this as the 8th book in a series or if you'll be confused. Hopefully I'm not confused. Lastly, coming out March 13th is Everyone in the Group Chat Dies by L.M. Chilton. This is the same author of the book Swiped that I really enjoyed in 2024. Kirby Cornell needs a break from everything. Her crumbling flat in the sleepy town of Crowhurst, famous for its award-winning sausage rolls and a second-rate serial killer from the 90s. Her dead-end job, her sleazy landlord, her slavish housemates, and most of all, the terrible thing they all did. Luckily, that hasn't caught up with her just yet until a new message on their old group chat pops. Everyone in the group chat will die. It's the first text her ex-flatmate and social media sleuth Esme has sent for ages, but that's not the really weird thing. The really weird thing is Esme died 12 months ago. This is said to be a laugh-out-loud thriller, a murder mystery that fuses the flatmate comedy of Friends with the serial killer thrills of I Know What You Did Last Summer. And I really enjoyed Swiped a lot, and this sounds really good to me as well, so I'm hoping this will be a really good time. That's it for my most anticipated books of January, February, and March 2025. Let me know down below if I missed anything that you think I should have on my radar, and let me know what your most anticipated books are for the first couple of months of the year. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!